So this is the planning board's part of this joint meeting between the housing trust and the health department. Just a quick roll call. Hillary Hedges Rayport,
Here.
John Kitchener,
Here.
Nat Lowell,
Here.
Joe Topham,
Here.
and for alternates we have Howard Matz,
Yes.
Abby De Molina.
Here.
I don't think is Stephen Welch on. I don't see him. Staff members. Do we have Billy Sod?
Here.
Meg Trudell.
Here.
Leslie Snell.
Here.
Is Catherine and Sarah on as well?
Here.
Great. Thank you all. I would take a motion to approve the agenda from the planning board part.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion made by Joe, seconded by John. Joe,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Hillary,
Aye.
Nat,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. So I will turn it over either to the trust or to the Board of Health to get their meeting going.
Okay, I'm Ann Smith. I'm the chair of the Board of Health. I can call our roll. I'm here. Meredith?
Here.
Carrie?
Here.
Tom?
Here.
Jim Cooper. I don't think he's here yet. We'll give him a jingle, but anyway, we have 4 out of our 5, so
Right.
we're good.
Good.
So,
And I guess we can call the Board of Health's part of the meeting to order.
Great. So then, Penny, are you chairing the
my understanding through you, Mr. Chair, to Dylan, this is not a posted meeting for the trust. Is that right? I think I'm the only one here.
Sorry, Penny, through you, Mr. Chair. It is a posted meeting, and we do have Abby, Mary Mack, and Chantal is here.
Okay, great. So acting as Vice Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust, I'd like to call our meeting to order, and I'll take attendance by roll call vote. Abby?
Here.
And Mary?
Here.
Chantal?
Here.
And the Vice Chair says I am present as well.
Great. So we called this meeting today, I guess the planning board did, just out of concern and wanting to have a discussion about the new septic regulations that the Board of Health is putting forward. I've read the letters in the packet or the information in the packet. Is there anything, Dylan, is there anything else that I'm missing, or should we just have at it?
Well, just procedurally, Mr. Chair, I know that you had the planning board vote to approve the agenda. Does the Board of Health and Affordable Housing Trust need to do the same?
Might as well, just to be safe, I would say. I don't know if they need to or not.
Okay, well, I'll take it over for the Board of Health, the Affordable Housing Trust. Could we have a motion, please, to approve the agenda for this special meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, by roll call, all those in favor, Abby?
Aye.
Thank you, Chantal.
Aye.
And Mary?
Aye.
And the Vice Chair votes aye. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the agenda for the special meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Ann? Aye. Carrie?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Great. So Dylan, is there anything you want to say before we are?
Sure.
Go ahead, Penny.
I'm sorry. I was going to suggest that has there been an opportunity for the Board of Health yet to respond to the letter from the Select Board and see if they have any questions about that letter? I guess that's a question.
No, I think that's a good question, and I would put that to the Board of Health. Did you guys have a chance to review the Select Board letter?
Can I ask what you're talking about and when?
The letter is dated. Give me a second to pull it up here. It was dated January 15th, and it was addressed to you, Anne. So, and I think it pretty fairly outlined, at least for me, for me personally, my concerns about the new regulations. I don't know if you guys want to take a second and read it real quick. It is in the packet that Dylan put together today.
Yeah, I think I'm afraid we're going to need to do that because it was, I know I have read this letter. It was a while ago. I have not, I've had a day that has not allowed me to read through the packet today, but you know, if you'd like us to do that, we'd be happy to do that.
If you guys want to just take a second, if you all have it, or I can just go ahead and read it out loud if that's a better way to do it.
Can you share your screen?
At Property Watch, we do what you would expect from a caretaker.
Instead
of just a weekly visit.
Okay.
Yikes. I don't have it.
Okay. All right. Read it. Go ahead and read it.
But hold on. Maybe staff, Meg, could you do it and share your screen?
Dylan can.
Dylan.
I can do it, Mr. And I can also, if you don't mind, through you, Mr. Chair, I could just sort of center the conversation and just, I really appreciate all of the board members and all the staff members taking time. I know that we have all of our own meetings, and then doing a joint meeting is a lot to add on to it. So I appreciate everybody taking the time to do that. And just to center the conversation, the joint meeting was really born out of thinking about the septic regulation amendments, and making sure that as we move towards a more sustainable environment with the IA systems, that we're thinking about the reverberating impact that the amendments could have on other areas of the island and the Select Board strategic plan. And so that's really, I think, why as staff we were interested in having the meeting. And I don't want to speak for the planning board, but I get a sense that is why they requested the joint meeting. And I'm happy to, I have the letter pulled up, so I'm happy to share my screen. But just as a quick primer, it just outlines all of the things that I presented to both the Select Board and the Board of Health about in terms of thinking about ways we can align the regulations so that they advance both the environmental concerns and the housing concerns on the island. And so you can see here, what I'm highlighting here, these are really the main recommendations laid out in the letter, which is from the Select Board.
There are 4 points. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think there's another page as well, but yes, there are 4 points on this page. And I think those points are the most important ones. I think from my perspective, I guess since we called this, I'm going to share a little bit of my perspective on this, as well as opening up for other planning boards members to share their perspective. And I think we know where the Affordable Housing Trust stands, but also them. So for me, my greatest concern about the new proposed regulations, I share a lot of the select board's concerns. I really am concerned about unintended consequences and who they will affect. And I really fear that who these are going to have the worst impacts on are the people that are really kind of on the edge of staying here on the island, and that if they were in a situation where their septic failed and they were in the wellhead protection district, that might be the last straw. So that and many of the other things listed in this letter are really my greatest concerns. I don't know if there's any other planning board members that would like to weigh in with concerns. Penny, let me get to my guys and I'll get to you. Planning board members at the moment, anyone?
I wonder, on behalf of the Board of Health, if these 4 points are pretty broad. Would somebody like to explain to us more fully how they could see them, each of them working?
I want to let me go to Penny first, and then let's circle back to that question, Ann. Penny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there will be not a variety of questions, and maybe we just ask them all, and then we, with the help of staff, try and understand the answers. I wanted to say that I guess I have a general comment, and then I have 3 questions. My general comment is increasingly, I believe that the opportunities for more housing for folks that live here it's going to be in the manner of infill in areas that already are somewhat developed, maybe where there's an existing house and somebody wants to do a secondary dwelling unit and an ADU. So in the past, the trust has focused heavily on building new in areas where there's existing sewer, town sewer, and water infrastructure. But I think the way things are going, with less than 4% of the island left for development, it's going to be infill, which would be in areas such as the Hummock Pond area, for instance. I'm a little confused about the reference in the proposed regulations that new construction would trigger the need for an IA system, even if the existing conventional system is functioning under state regulations. And new construction, I'd like to know or understand better, how is that defined in Chapter 223? Because septic regulations are based on bedrooms and gallon, you know all this, the Board of Health knows this, gallons of flow per bedroom. And if somebody, for instance, wants to add a family room to their property, does that new construction, which isn't a bedroom, trigger these new regulations? That's my first question. My second question, and really my biggest concerns, are similar to what Dave already expressed, which is around the area of unintended consequences. And as part of that, I'm wondering if the Board of Health has done any kind of an assessment yet about how many properties in the Hummock Pond watershed needs area would be impacted by this, or how many would be affected, and exactly, how would they be impacted? And then lastly, in Chapter 288.7, there's a reference to the Board of Health being able to issue a special variance, is the language that's used. Why would it be a variance and not like a special permit? And that's probably just my ignorance. Maybe there's a legal answer to that. So those would be my questions. And then I would ask the Affordable Housing Trust if any of our members have other questions or comments. I can't see anybody the way my screen is set up. So Dylan, I'm going to have to rely on you.
It's tough. There's a lot. Penny, can we try to let someone from either the Health Department or Board of Health answer your questions before we talk more, please?
Yeah.
So if
what I was going to suggest, Dave, is to have the three experts that we have on the call, Andrew Shapiro, John Hedden, and Carrie McKenna, a board member who wrote or who was very influential in rewriting some of these regulations, state the reason for the fact that it was tackled by the board in the first place, and the reasons why it came up and became something that we were very concerned about. So you guys, I don't know who wants to begin, but I think
Yeah, if someone could begin, and I hate to kind of make it confusing like this, but I don't want Penny's questions to slip away. So if one of the three could answer Penny's question, and then I think it would be very helpful to understand the why we're updating our regulations now. I think that would help color the whole rest of the conversation for sure. So if someone could answer Penny's questions to start, and then maybe give us all kind of a quick overview on why now, and what you guys were hoping to achieve by reworking the septic regs.
John, do you want to answer the new construction question, which is, what constitutes new construction? And then we can go down to the Hummock Pond question about if we have done a survey of how many impacted. And then if there is a difference between, Penny talked about special permits and then our special variants. But if you can maybe address your definition of new construction that we've been using on the island.
Yeah, John Hedden, Chief Environmental Health Officer with the town of Nantucket for the Health Department. Yeah, the definition of new construction in Chapter 223 Board of Health Regulation is addition of habitable space. So I think, Penny, when you said bump out a living room or something to that degree, yes, that would be new construction and would trigger an upgrade for the existing septic system if it's not in compliance with local and state regulations.
Great. And then on reviewing how many properties that it would impact, did anyone have I guess it's probably a simple yes or no, or yes and then some.
Yeah, I'm not sure, in terms of doing a survey, looking at it, I'm sorry, Carrie McKenna, Board of Health, assessing how many properties could potentially be impacted. I guess that would come down to knowing which ones are on IA already and who isn't. And that I don't think we have a solid number on that right now. I mean, if that's something that was a critical number, we could, essentially go through the property list and see who's already transformed to IA and who isn't.
Okay. That's fair. Joe?
Thank you,
Wait,
Mr.
hold
Chair.
on. Before that,
The permit question.
yes, go ahead, Gary. I'm sorry, Joe.
Oh yeah, and I'm probably not the best one to answer the permit, but I'm just keeping track of the three
Yeah.
questions. So I'm not sure if John or Penny, could you repeat the question again in terms of, is it special? You want to know the difference between a special variance and a special permit?
My last question had to do with that. I was reading the proposed regulations, and it talks about that the Board of Health can issue a special variance at their discretion. And I'm probably misinterpreting this, but I know in other boards to get a variance, the threshold is much higher. It's more difficult than a special permit. And it was curious to me to see the language special and variance used together. And maybe it's different in the health world than it is, say, at the Zoning Board of Appeals or something.
Yeah. John, you want to tackle that? Because, at least for mine would be, there's a regulation, and in order to essentially not have to follow that regulation, it requires a special action by the board, particular to that property. And sometimes with conditions attached to it, like deed restrictions, a couple of things like that. But I'm not sure if it's I'm not sure there's a difference between a variance and a special variance.
So it could be simply semantics here. I just think when I started making my comments about infill, I think also now with the Seasonal Communities Act and this the new, statewide accessory dwelling unit regulations, I see again people like say somebody has a 4-bedroom septic and they have a 3-bedroom house and they want to add a 1-bedroom something that's an accessory dwelling unit. Is that going to force an upgrade to an IA system?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
well,
I just
yeah,
think
well,
I think that we're putting potentially, this is really where I'm coming from. I think potentially there's not an ill-defined or undefined potential financial burden on the very people who can't afford to do this. And I'll just leave it at that. But thank you. I've talked enough. Okay.
All right, great. So I've got Joe that I interrupted and someone else with their hand up, but I wanted to give the health board or someone on the Board of Health the opportunity to explain why we're changing our regs now and what the outcome that you hope to achieve with those changes.
Yeah. I'll start, and then John and Andrew, please feel free to jump in. There's existing regulations for Matagit and the harbor already, which are these regulations. So part of the island has these regulations in place and has them in effect for a while. When we look at Matagit, the change in regulations has had a very positive effect. Long Pond is probably the healthiest pond on the island now. And it has come at great expense to the owners. I'm one of the owners of Matagit, and if I pull a permit, I got to replace my system. So we're very, but that we knew that when we came into the situation. It really is water quality. We are concerned about it. The regulations that were put in place for Matagit and the harbor have had a positive impact, and extending those to the rest of the island for consistency, and also just protect those areas where Hummock and Wellhead are the more densely populated areas. So any thing we can do to keep the water supply healthy in a densely populated area is where we're coming from. It's protecting the water. Bottom line, protecting a sole source aquifer. I mean, that's simplest. We have it in place in parts of the island already, and it seemed that it's time to extend it to the rest of the island for the same reasons.
Great. Okay. No, I think that's a great explanation. Thank you. Nat, stop sighing. Joe, do you want to? I'm sorry, but I'm back to you now, Joe.
Thank you. Well, back in my Concom days, there was a gentleman that was cleaning up one of his Concom permits, and the prior owner had done some illegal work. And so when he came in and was cleaning up the permit, the Concom was saying, no matter what you do, anything, even they put a shed on, you got to upgrade the system. Yet it was a functioning system. It passed all the tests at the time of sale. And I just didn't feel this is a way to have this local owner year-round member of our community to be penalized. So I think that this is really important. We really got to be careful what's happening. I also know of a kid out in Tom Nevers, he had a 2-bedroom house. And he and his wife had a child. They wanted to have a second child, and they decided just to do an attached shed, if you will. And the reason being because they didn't have a lot of ground cover, or the way the house was positioned, there was no direct connectivity to the house. He had to go outside and then go into his house just for his remote office, so he could still, have some office space private, not waking up his young child. And that was also a trigger for him to do an AI system. And so thankfully at the last minute, the Board of Health came and said, you don't have to do it for this because that doesn't make sense. So I really think the wording of this really has to be specific, really know what's going to happen. Is it really going to be this? Are we just adding an addition to a living room? Does that matter? I mean, my parents lived, in their house forever. Next to the 7 kids. What do they have to do? They had to expand and have a larger kitchen and dining room. It's not like the bedroom changes or anything like that, but there are certain little triggers that you have to be mindful of. Does a minor little bump out? Does a box bay? Does that trigger this? I mean, there really has to be some guardrails, really some forethought of what would happen, what different variations, or the board has to take each permit time by time. And I would also feel that maybe have some delays or timing, some way to stall a permit. And I just think this is really careful. It's to Penny's point, you have young families finally affording houses and they want to do some small expansion or something to these spaces or upgrade a 1960s home. Like this is going to be really problematic. It almost is going to, like Penny says, you're not going to be able to do anything to those. And I think that that's really important. We just need to be really careful of how this is going to be laid out. Right now, what I've read, sorry, I've had a really distracting couple of weeks that I haven't really dug into this, but off the cuff, this is what I'm coming up with. But I really hope that the Board of Health slows down a little bit, really kind of looks at every option and sees what's best and some variables, some exceptions, or whatever that is. I just don't see that right now coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Abby.
Hi, thank you. I think Joe made a lot of great points, and I just think kind of along the same lines. I'd love to know what this type of cost is, and have us outline a proposal for some sort of exemption, for year-round folks. But also, I really think before we should even think of putting new regulations in place, I think it's essential for us to have the data of how many people would be affected. Does this affect 5 people, 500 people? Like, I really think you should be doing your due diligence on that before you propose this, just because we should have some way to understand the order of magnitude. Just, I think that's really important regardless, whatever we're doing. I just think it's important to get a sense of like who that audience is, because we would have to have discussions. And I think if this change were to come and suddenly affect all these people, like there's going to need to be a lot of communication, making sure people are aware of this, that they understand how it affects them, understand the different scenarios, as Joe pointed out, like different what it would mean. But I think you'd have to do a lot of that work first, and that should be done prior to proposing any changes. Just my thoughts.
Great. Thank you, Abby. Joe, is that your
Yeah, so I just want to follow up on Abby that so the cost, this is last year for AI system, was $85,000. So that was just
So
an
that's a
estimate.
big number, yeah.
It's a big number.
Yeah.
And that doesn't include like the one, I have a caretaking property out in Tom Nevers. They spend it's $2,500 a year for inspections. They have to go in, inspect it every year, check it twice a year. Which my client is fine. He understands what he got himself into. But at the same time, that is a reoccurring, it's almost like you're part of a condo association fee that is routinely goes on, and you have to file it with the state, and it has to be tested and has to be inspected. So I really think there's a lot of unforeseens that people really aren't laying out. So think about it. If God forbid the kid gets sick or something, and then all of a sudden this money's going to something where it's just trying to have a normal septic system. So
or to Penny's point, you're adding on a bedroom because you had another child, and then that all of a sudden you have a $100,000 septic system you have to put in. I think Penny had her hand up before you, Mary. So let me go to Penny, and I'll come right back to you.
Just very quickly, I haven't seen an IA system in my experience, my professional experience, under 100,000 in the last year. And of course, they go up from there depending on conditions and such. That's all I had something else, but I'll hold it for now. Thank you.
Mary?
Yeah, sorry, I can't find the raise
No.
button.
Okay, I saw you.
Thank you. But I think that there's 2 things that we are considering is nobody's going to want to live here if our water gets contaminated. So I do think that is the most important thing. And these regulations do allow for a variance for someone that bought a house, is living here. They do allow for variances for someone to come to the meeting and say, and that's what's been happening. But it has not been, I bought my dream house living on Nantucket year round, and that like we need a variance so that we can put in an AI system and get extra bedrooms. It's been not that.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. And so I do think that is something to consider. I think there's variances allowed, and if we don't have clean water nobody can live here. I read about Bridgewater, Massachusetts this week, and their water's brown. And they had to call up Middleborough next door and say, hey, can we tap into your water? Because our water is polluted. I don't know if maybe somebody has an answer. I don't know if this is under the planning purview or but where would we get that water if that were to happen to us?
Yeah,
I don't know the answer to that.
I think those are all great points, Mary. But with that said, I mean, you have to remember, I would say 90% of our commercial zoning is in the Wellhead Protection District. All of our gas stations and car washes are in the Wellhead Protection District. So is it really these independent septic systems that are the failure point, or are they other things? And should we focus on those? And I'm not saying that it isn't important to bring our septic up to date, but I just really fear the negative effect it's going to have on the most fragile families we have on the island. Nat.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Where's Mark Willett in this meeting? That guy needs to be on these meetings because he knows what he's talking about. And when stuff gets said about the water all getting polluted, that's not going to happen here. Okay. It's coming from way down deep. We got some great water. Please, let's not go there. So I feel like we're having a haves and a have-not conversation. Okay. And that's unfortunate that it's come down to this for septic systems. So let's talk a little bit about Shimo sewering. So Shimo got sewered. That was the first Robert B. Hour project. And grinder pumps are now the new thing. No one ever heard of those things, like the way they're getting put in today. I'm making a comparison of grinder pump maintenance and all the things that can go wrong with them to an IA. So it's sort of like two different sort of costs, maintenance, failure issues, especially with the grinder pump. You're in trouble if it's not working. I just feel that when you don't need to do something that is that punitive, just the cost part, I'm talking about the future maintenance part that you're subject to if you don't need to be. That's something to take into consideration. And I don't care if you're rich or poor. You shouldn't be forced to do that if you don't need to do it. Okay, so that would be my sort of way of explaining it. I've gone to numerous homes where they've shut the power off to the grinder pump because they didn't realize they were doing it. Somebody shutting the pool down for the winter, and all of a sudden it's bubbling up in their yard and they're calling for a gas smell. And I couldn't believe it when this has happened several times. So you have more things to fix, more things for people to deal with on their property. And the comments about Long Pond's open to the ocean. The dump going into Long Pond has been the narrative for 30 years or more. And all of a sudden now Long Pond is fixed because of IA. I don't know. That seems like a bit of a stretch to say. I'm not a scientist, but that's a big stretch because we still have the dump. Nothing's changed out there. So I don't know where that came from. The other thing I want to talk about is the zoning that we've changed in Mattakit and in the Hummock Pond area. Staff is on. They can correct me if I'm wrong. We changed a lot of zoning in Mattakit to make less density before the water went out there from Fisher's Landing. I am personally not a supporter of sewering Mattakit. I think it's a waste of money. And with IA, what would you want to do that for? There's no purpose to sewer out there. Okay, so that you should be happy about that, the people on the Board of Health, because that would cost bazillions for no real benefit at all. Now, out in Hummock was the same situation. A lot of R20, a lot of small zonings just happened to be out there from the 70s. And we've changed it to VR. There's a lot of VR out there now. And Leslie and Megan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. So there's less buildable ground cover in these two areas that we're talking about than there was 10, 15 years ago. I think that needs to be taken into consideration when Penny brings up infill, because that is what the future growth is going to be. There isn't just open lots just sitting there waiting to have trophy homes built. They're going to be torn down to build a trophy home, but they're already constructed now. That's the kind of development that we're going to see in those areas. So I think we need to think about everything that's been said earlier by others. We need to be really sure and positive about what we're doing here, putting an onerous situation on property owners, whether they can afford it or not, should not really be the main focus. I understand why it is, and I agree with those reasons, but I'm saying if you have the money for something doesn't mean you should be forced to do something that someone else just because they can't afford it. That doesn't make any sense. I think we need to look at this holistically. We need to look at where the sewer is going to end up. I think the Somerset area is going to get sewered. I hope it does, but I think that's it. That is going to be it in that area. I don't think you're going to see it go any further than that. It doesn't make any sense to go out to Hummock Pond. Yeah, in my opinion, it certainly doesn't make any sense to go Millbrook to Mattocket. So, because you'd have to pick up Fisher's Landing too. So, so that's my comments for now, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you. And I did see you waving your hand, but I've got 3 other people. So if you could just hold on for a sec, or is it super important, Ann?
Well, I kind of think that we've got the cart before the horse here. I think that we need to look at the science, the data, and the actual facts that we were looking at when we began to think about adjusting these regulations and the reasons for that. And we have 2 experts who are trained in water quality, in environmental science, and all that here on this call, John Hedden and Andrew Shapiro. And I really would love it if we took a couple of minutes for them to give an overview on where we were and where we are now and some of the reasons behind all this. Because I think what I'm hearing is a lot of people giving opinions and not listening to the facts and the science behind it. And once we've done that, then I think we can sort of begin to think about how is the best way to make adjustments.
Okay, I agree. So would one of those 2 people, Penny, hold on a sec, like to have the floor for a minute to explain the science and why we're diving into this?
Madam Chair, this is Andrew. I'm happy to go.
That would be great,
Thank you,
Andrew. Thank
Andrew.
you so much. Can you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and
Yeah,
what
let
you-
me
Yeah.
try to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Great. So I'm Andrew Shapiro. I'm the Environmental Contamination Administrator for the Health Department, and I'm just going to provide some information on the status of the water quality for the Hummock Pond watershed and the Wellhead Protection District. I am a professional engineer licensed in Massachusetts. I have my master's from the Harvard School of Public Health, and basically deal with all things PFAS and environmental contamination for the town. So, hold on. So we've already kind of touched on the regulation summaries, but I'll just reiterate it real quick. So innovative alternative systems, IA systems, will be required for new construction, property transfer, system failure. The regulations would stipulate 5-year inspections. They would provide no loading credits. And it would align the wellhead protection districts and the Hummock Pond watershed area with the Nantucket Harbor and Mattocket regulations. And the regulations really center around nitrogen loading. So we're going to talk a lot about nitrogen, but we'll also talk about a few other classes of contaminants, PFAS, and emerging contaminants. Real quick, I should have mentioned I have 2 sets of slides in the packet. I'm going to share the first 9 or so slides, but then there is a more detailed, more scientific set of slides at the back half of the materials that are in your packet. So here's how I'm framing this question or this problem. First, is there a problem? Is it a current or a future problem? How severe is the problem, and what's the level of evidence? That's the first bucket. And then, is wastewater responsible for the problem? Those are the two key points to keep in mind in terms of protecting Nantucket's public health and water resources. And it's really important to keep in mind that there are two sets of regulations, and they concern different areas, and they also have slightly different intents. So for the Hummock Pond area, this is really about surface water quality. And back in 2014, the Massachusetts Estuaries Project published the Hummock Pond Estuary Plan. And I have a lot of direct quotes from this in the supplemental slides, but just briefly, it identifies the primary threat to Hummock Pond as nutrient loading, especially nitrogen, which is one of the key nutrients in wastewater and is also the key contaminant targeted by septic regulations. So since the 1950s, nitrogen has increased significantly in this area. The nitrogen that is released from a septic system has the potential to travel many miles through the aquifer or also through runoff. So nitrogen that's released, several miles away could potentially end up in Hummock Pond. And wastewater is the largest contributor of nitrogen entering the pond. That estuary plan specifically did recommend that future efforts target reducing nitrogen loading and not on maintaining nitrogen loading. So it identified a clear problem of too much nitrogen entering the Hummock Pond area and identified wastewater as the key contributor to that problem. And here's a good graph from that report. So on the left, we have the overall nitrogen loading. And this report identified that 65% of nitrogen loading was from wastewater specifically. Now, of course, people cannot control all of the nitrogen inputs into a watershed. Most importantly, some nitrogen does come from the atmosphere. So 81% of nitrogen loading that we can control comes from wastewater. So when the Board of Health thinks about what knobs can they turn to reduce nitrogen loading into the Hummock Pond watershed, wastewater is by and large the biggest knob that the Board of Health has to turn. So, fertilizers, we do have fertilizer regulations. It's actually a small contributor of nitrogen to the watershed, and wastewater really dominates that. So that's why the Board of Health is looking at nitrogen specifically and is thinking about changes to reduce nitrogen loading from wastewater. So there is a documented problem of nitrogen enrichment in the Hummock Pond watershed area. And just to talk a little bit about what that means for Nantucket's public health and environment. So nitrogen can fuel cyanobacteria, which are harmful algal blooms. These are fueled by nitrogen and can be exacerbated when there are warm temperatures, sunlight, and slow-moving water. So Hummock Pond is actually particularly susceptible to these types of blooms, partly because of the slow-moving water. The head of Hummock Pond in particular is particularly susceptible. And just a quick anecdote, when we were doing our PFAS sampling in surface water at the head of Hummock Pond, we actually weren't able to sample one day because of a harmful algal bloom. It wasn't safe for our staff to get in the water and collect a sample. So you can see how, this can spill over to affect public health in other ways. In this case, we have less information on other contaminants because of this harmful algal bloom that was there over the summer. So what health concerns should people be thinking about with harmful algal blooms? Exposure can occur through the skin contact, ingestion, or inhalation. so making the water unsafe to use. This can cause gastrointestinal illness, skin or eye irritation, respiratory symptoms, particularly high exposures, which hopefully do not occur because people keep out of the water, can cause liver or neurological damage. But not everyone knows to stay out of the water. Children and pets can be especially vulnerable. MassDPH, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, indicates that pets can even die if they come into contact with this water. So that's the Hummock Pond watershed area. We're going to transition a little bit to talk about the wellhead protection districts. The logic is a little bit different, and also the status of these resources is a little bit different. So again, thinking about, is there a problem, and is wastewater responsible for the problem? So we're going to talk about 3 different types of contaminants. First is going to be PFAS. So is there a problem? There has been a significant problem with water quality in the Wanacommet system. One well 15, has been shut down since 2022 due to PFAS contamination. The Massachusetts regulated PFAS 6 concentration reached 55.5 parts per trillion, which is more than 2 times greater the state drinking water standard of 20 parts per trillion. We often talk about water quality in the Wanacommet area, or Wanacommet system, but the Sconset supply does have occasional detects of the Massachusetts PFAS 6 as well. And Nantucket relies on a sole source aquifer, meaning that there is no other source of water. I know someone brought up earlier, what would we do? And I think the answer is that this is the only option. I have in my slides here that the island is currently in a level 3 critical drought. That actually changed over the weekend. The town is now in a level 2 severe drought. So the situation is a little bit better, but not much. And the water quality and the water quantity issues actually do interconnect a lot. And for example, I have here the well has been shut down since 2022. That water does need to be treated as required by Mass DEP, but it has been difficult to treat that water because of the drought conditions, namely to test the treatment system. There's just no chance to take that area offline for any amount of time. So the drought has delayed the treatment of this water. Now, is wastewater responsible? So we hired a consulting firm to do a preliminary conceptual site model, and it did identify septic as one potential source to these high PFAS concentrations that were in the well. Ultimately, we do not know what has caused the contamination in Nantucket's public water supply, but septic is one potential source, and we do have that on our website for people to review. Next, going to talk about nitrogen. So currently, no public wells exceed the Mass DEP nitrate limit of 10 milligrams per liter. This is a drinking water standard that targets preventing methemoglobinemia, which is blue baby syndrome. More recent evidence suggests that nitrate or nitrite, which are common septic contaminants, under certain conditions are probably carcinogenic to humans. That's not under all situations. I have more details in the supplementary slides. The pathways are kind of interesting but complicated, but it is better to be exposed to less nitrate and nitrate in your drinking water, even if it is in attainment of the state standard of 10 milligrams per liter. And as was the case for the Hummock Pond water area, nitrogen that is released into the groundwater can travel particularly far in the environment, especially in sandy soils, which we have on Nantucket. All right, last thing before I wrap up is emerging contaminants. in the Wellhead Protection District. So first, what are emerging contaminants? PFAS are considered emerging contaminants. We already covered those, but then there are other emerging contaminants that would be expected to be found in wastewater. Pharmaceuticals, antimicrobials, microplastics, endocrine disrupting chemicals. All of these are in common pharmaceutical products, medications, or just general consumer products and can end up in the wastewater in the septic. Now, there has been some research done by USGS, the U.S. Geological Survey, as well as Silent Spring Institute, who they focus specifically on Cape Cod. And these contaminants are not commonly detected, but they have been detected. And generally, concentrations are not expected to cause health impacts. We should be careful to not generalize those results to Nantucket. Those are either national surveys or Cape Cod surveys. That doesn't mean it wouldn't be an issue on Nantucket, but we also don't know that that is an active issue at the moment. Important thing about emerging contaminants is that a lot of the toxicological data is still in development, which means that some of these health concern thresholds could decrease as we learn more about them. That's all I've got. I'm of course happy to take any questions, but I hope it gives a sense of just laying out what the problems are and how the Board of Health can address them. And yeah, I'll turn it back to the chair.
Okay, Andrew, can I just ask you a couple questions before I'm sure there's going to be
Sure.
a bunch of hands up? Is there any historical data on the nitrogen levels in the aquifer?
Yep, it's a regularly monitored contaminant. So the Wannacomet, the Sconset systems have quite a backlog of data.
Is it showing that it's increasing exponentially every year, or is it pretty static?
It's hard to tell. You know, if you ask a scientist if something's increasing, you know, you have to run a bunch of statistical tests and try to figure that out. It's certainly not decreasing. It's not increasing exponentially. There's maybe a small increase, but hard to tell if that would be statistically significant.
And then just lastly, IA systems, like regular septic systems, don't filter out PFAS, correct?
No, they don't filter out PFAS.
Great, thanks. If you, I don't know if I can't see the okay, I've got them. Great. So, questions, Joe, your hands up.
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. I hear what Nat's saying, but I'm more of a cautionary tale. I do hear what the Board of Health is saying. I do think we have some concerns. One thing that Mark Willett of Wannacomet, he came before the planning board and the NP and EDC. And one of the things he was talking about was PFAS and how we could turn on, I think it was pump 15, and take care of Tom's Way, which had a plume of PFAS. So one of the things as he was talking, I kind of was trying to figure out, well, what's the solution? And so during my master plan of Mattakit and the Mattakit area group, I asked him, you know, how much space would you need to drill a well? And the reason being was because I think if this PFAS in Mattakit, drill a well, Wannacomet drills it, then what do you have is a mobile. I asked him, could you create or build a mobile generation plant with a filtering system on a 18-wheeler flatbed, house it on the property, clean up the wastewater, the PFAS within the Mattakit area, and then say there's something, well, I think was the other one, Washington Pond, I think just came up. You know, and then move it to there and get new filters. And I know that he said that the filters are $500,000 and they can be cleaned and then recycled and reused, and then kind of go around the island and kind of clean this up. And I agree with what Meredith Lepre is saying. I think it's true that we have to be taking care of this. And I think the water is really important to us, because otherwise, what are we doing? But that was a system that Mark is working on. And I think that would be really advantageous for Nantucket to be able to go around and hypothetically, let's say that the Mattakit well cleans up the area. Now he could just say, well, I got to pump a Mattakit and I could tap into the Mattocket, wells or water line, and then they could be drinking Mattocket water, and then some of the wells could be reduced in some of the areas and maybe help with the state levels as far as the water table and stuff like that. The other part to the IA system, 2015, 16, I think it was 41, $42 million the town spent on sewering Monomoy, Shimo, some areas around there. And I want to say it's an average of like 500 homes that were tapped into it. I don't understand why maybe not putting this owner on, or this cost on the owners. Maybe that's something that the town could come up and say that, like, we'll subsidize this, we'll put it in there, because otherwise we have to put in sewer. And I think that there's maybe some way, I know Libby's right now probably screaming at me, but there's got to be some way that we can kind of figure out some way to help. We're not going to, the sewer plant is not going to be able to hold too many more sewer lines like Nat said. But at the same time, can we put it in? Can we do this? I think this is really important. But then go back to 2018 where Myacomet Pond was overflowing and causing problems, and then it was becoming stagnant because there was one person on the natural resource department that didn't want to open up the ponds. And so that's where I think you have to be really careful. If the Indians were doing it, it kind of kept going, and we've been doing it up until the 80s, and also the state comes in, you can't open up the ponds. And her comment was, so your solution is dilution. And it was like, but this is what we've been doing, and this is how Nantucket needs to operate. So I understand there's some people here, but what does Nantucket do? That's what's really important. Not, hey, I think this is happening, but also if we are opening the ponds, well, what's another solution we can do? Is the well system, Wanacoma, can we work together? What's some different variables and smarter engineering that we've created, and that the John had and Andrew are kind of coming up with and saying, well, this is what's coming forward, and we know there's new, better systems that are coming forward. I know Martha's Vineyard has a new system that hasn't quite come over to here. We haven't really investigated it, but I think there's certain systems that we should be looking at, but also look at some of the older methods that kind of help us clean up our water. And I do think there's a problem, and I think that we should be looking at every option and a way to get, maybe part of it's done through home ownership, and part of it's done through the town, and part of it's done with the Wanacoma. And I really think that this could be a solution we kind of work on. But I think right now we're pushing something where we don't have any answers. It's really rigid in this guidelines. And I just think we really need to kind of pause on this. Not too much longer, because I don't want any more, anything being, not treated and causing more problems down the line. I think that, Emily Molden has been doing a great job with, helping out the harbor and stuff like that. And I think there's a lot of positive we've been doing. So I think we're going multiple directions. But we just need to be careful really what guidelines we're putting in place. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. Penny Dye.
Okay. My question, well, sort of a comment and a question. I think when developing public policy, there has to be some sort of rationale, right? And cause and effect relationship. So my question through you, Mr. Chair, probably to Andrew. Andrew, thank you for that report. Is there any sort of a scientific threshold, a certain amount of nitrogen, just for helping me understand better, that would trigger a change in policy? Is there any kind of a formula that the health department uses?
Sure, I can answer that. So for ecological receptors, Hummock Pond in particular, that threshold is about 0.5 milligrams per liter.
Okay.
And the estuary plan recommends a 62% reduction in nitrogen loading to the Hummock Pond watershed. So, basically there is just too much nitrogen loading into that area at the moment.
So what is the number per liter right now in the Hummock Pond watershed?
I would have to back calculate it.
Okay. That would be helpful, I think, to understand that going forward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if I can jump in a little bit.
Yeah, sure, John. I've got a couple people ahead of you, but you go for it.
Okay, so I'm just kind of in
That's all
relation
right.
with this question and with Andrew's presentation. Andrew's going to have more probably the technical data, but to answer Penny's question, So what you do is it's something called total maximum daily loads, which is what Mass DEP does the study for, to calculate the amount of nutrients that embayments or estuaries can handle daily. So they come up with that number of how much it can accept in that period of time, and what can we do to control that. So that was the main. Mass DEP's done official total maximum daily loads for Nantucket Harbor and Mattocket. So that's they haven't published that as far as Title V to define those as nitrogen sensitive areas. We've done that locally, but that's how those areas are calculated.
Great. Thank you, John. Hillary.
Thank you very much. I want to firstly thank the Board of Health for your leadership in looking at this issue. Our census increased 40% in the last census. Every year we do over 2,000 COAs at our HTC. I mean, that could be paint changes, but it's additions and demolitions and moves. We add, I think, over 200 new builds every year. This all has an impact on our island. We can't put our heads in the sand and think that we don't have to upgrade our infrastructure. We have really limited willingness among the tax-paying base to put in additional sewers. We'll figure out if that flies at this town meeting. But I think, when we're saying, well, we don't want to saddle the people in these protected areas, in the wellhead protection area or the Hummock Pond area, with the obligation when they choose to expand, which may be because of a need within their family, or it could be discretionary, probably given that 60% of our homes are second homes. It most frequently is discretionary. We don't want to saddle those people with the expense of an IA system. If we sewer, we are saddling our whole community with an expense wherever they live. If we do nothing, we are saddling people with a health expense. And we have people on this call who are young, who have had cancer, and they think it's potentially because of the water. So the health issue is really, really important. What I would like to just clarify, and maybe if John Hedden is probably the right person to jump in, I think what I'm hearing is that the Hummock Pond area and the wellhead protection area they have very different characteristics and very different outcomes, right? So am I correct that the Hummock Pond area is about protecting the pond and protecting children, dogs, people who live near the pond from nitrates, and to also be able to enjoy our ponds? And the wellhead protection area is about the groundwater for the whole island. But also, don't we have different characteristics? Like the Hummock Pond area, a lot of it, there's very limited opportunity for infill. A fair amount of it is in the country overlay district, but it is 100% nearly 100% septic. Whereas the wellhead protection area, we have a lot of sewers, so there's less exposure there, or less. There are going to be many, many fewer properties affected. So if you could just comment on that, and then maybe we could get some pathway to get a little more granularity on the properties and the characteristics affected, and how much hardship could be dealt with through waivers. Thanks very much.
Would you like me to answer?
Yes, please, John.
Okay. So yeah, as Andrew pointed out kind of in that presentation, Hummock is, or that regulation in that area kind of is more focused on surface water, the pond itself. There's always going to be a concern of nutrient loading no matter what when you have private wells in the area. And the wellhead, yes, is more focused on our drinking water. That's our sole source aquifer, public drinking water supply. So yeah, they are a bit different in that regard, the focus. Yeah. So, and then I guess a little bit on the hardship scenario. So with
I think I think when everyone answers that question, I think I'd like to go back and go line by line with the bullet points that the select board had in the letter, and I think that we'll address that then. Does that make sense? Dylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think actually that I wanted to just take a second to go back to circle the conversation back around to the recommendations, if that's okay. And I think that the really starting from Andrew's presentation and the conversation afterwards, a really great way to get back into it. And I don't want to pretend that I speak for the Affordable Housing Trust, but the recommendations were developed in collaboration with the Land and Water Council. And just to be clear, there we agreed with the Land and Water Council and the Board of Health that the recommendations they were putting forward in the Hummock Pond watershed made sense given the direct correlation that Andrew laid out in terms of nitrogen and those ponds and the fact that that's an area that may be sewered. So I can't speak for the Affordable Housing Trust there, but that's what's laid out in the select board's letter. And then I think our concern around, or the housing department and staff's concern around the Wellhead Protection District is that this is actually a perfect opportunity, if I may, to say we have a real environmental concern and a real housing concern. And in fact, housing is an environmental concern, and environmental concerns are housing concerns, and we can move forward together. And so, what are the ways that we can craft these regulations in tandem through an interboard and interdepartment collaboration that says we really do need to be moving towards IA systems for the reasons that are laid out, but we're recognizing that the regulations as written right now will have reverberating impacts, outsized impacts that outweigh the potential environmental benefits from harm to the community, and find a pathway forward for us and to work together. And I think to Madam Chair Smith's comments in the beginning about the bullet points being broad, I agree that the recommendations are broad, but that's largely by design because as the housing department, this is not our expertise. We can talk about how it will have impacts on housing, but we're really bringing it to the health department to
The
work with us and find that.
the Hummock Pond watershed area.
Okay.
And I will share I'll pull the recommendations back.
All right, great. Yeah, and for me, just real quick, I think that I feel, at least for me, that the board is trying to change the regulations to solve different problems, and I 100% agree that the Hummock Pond watershed is fragile, needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed now. I don't feel, even though the sole source aquifer is incredibly important, I would like to see data showing that nitrogen is really making its way there and that there's been real growth. So my personal opinion is Hummock Pond watershed area, no brainer. The Wellhead Protection District, maybe think about it, work on it a little more, but that's just my thought. So to the bullet points, the hardship waiver is the first bullet point for
Mr. Chair, can I just interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Non-substantive addition. I just wanted to let you know that Abby DeMolina had to drop, so the Affordable Housing Trust. I think this is okay for us to proceed because we're not voting on anything, but the Affordable Housing Trust doesn't have a quorum at this point.
Oh, is that true, Penny? Penny?
Yes, that's true. We don't have a quorum.
But Brooke
Okay.
Moore actually just joined. I just let her in from the waiting room.
Is Brooke on? Now we have a quorum.
Okay.
Perfect timing. So we're back.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you,
Sorry.
Brooke.
So do you want to go through the bullet points, Dylan? You want me to?
Yeah, I'm happy to if that's
Okay. That's great.
Yeah, so and again, this was a letter that was originally drafted by the Housing Department in collaboration with the Land and Water Council, and submitted at a select board meeting to the select board for them to endorse and send to the Board of Health back in mid-January. So the first one is to provide hardship waivers for year-round residents who are unable to afford the increased cost of an IA septic system. I think, stop me at any point if you want me to go further, but I think that's self-explanatory. Extend the septic loan program to provide financial assistance to year-round residents who will be required to upgrade to an IA septic system due to property transfers or new construction. Establish financial assistance for year-round residents who demonstrate need that provides a grant and or a 0% or low interest loan to finance maintenance of the IA septic system. And lastly, allow nitrogen loading credits in exchange for IA septic system and a year-round deed restriction on the property. So to clarify, that's the nitrogen loading credits are the variants in the Board of Health regulations that say, if you upgrade to an IA system, then you are allowed additional bedrooms per the Title V regulation. So it is what the IA system, it's giving what the IA system can handle in terms of effluents.
Does that make sense to the Board of Health, what those points? Because I think they address a lot of our concerns and a lot of the unintended consequences.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
it's Tom. Yeah, I have a couple things. We are all part of the town, right? As they say, as people glom us all together. And BOH definitely has purview here, but we have all have a common responsibility to govern for the whole island. So I think this is a beneficial conversation to get people on the same page. And on how this letter came about, right? The housing department Dylan comes to most of our meetings, or if not, watches them, and had a couple points to raise, and then came to a BOH meeting, and then we left the discussion that basically that staff was going to, both staffs were going to get together and kind of maybe toy around with drafting some potential amendments to our regulations. So I guess my question would be, has that happened? Because I feel like we're stepping back a little bit here. We've talked about this letter at Select Board. We talked about this letter at BOH. Dylan came on behalf of the housing department, and we sort of decided that we would take a look at some potential regulations. As my recollection is that my fellow BOH members were okay with that. So I maybe to the chair or to staff, if there's any update on that, and I have a couple other little points that maybe I'll wait on for a few.
And I think that question was to you, I believe. You're muted.
My answer to Tom and everyone would be that I think we were fully aware of these recommendations or, of this advice. We felt that a bunch of them had already been incorporated into how we operate, and that we wanted to wait for this meeting to go further and to kind of finalize what exceptions we might make. So I don't think that we've just sort of done nothing. I think we're very definitely waiting for this kind of roundtable discussion. It would be very helpful to me, and I agree with everybody who said let's go back to these 4 points and kind of thrash them out and see what it would look like if we could. How would we provide different waivers or variances maybe than what we are now? Because as we all have spoken about earlier in the meeting, there is a clause that provides for special, I guess that was the word everybody was kind of playing around with, special variances.
Are they written into your new, I guess that's the concern, are they actually written into your new regulations, allowing them?
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be, I believe, I'm speaking for myself, but I think for the board, it would be a case-by-case basis because we have seen situations, we have something in front of us right now where this so-called hardship may not really be a hardship. And so we would want proof of that, and we would, I guess, have to come up with what a hardship looks like.
Yeah, you have to establish a process to negotiate that.
Mr. Chair,
then, yes, sir.
if I may follow up.
Yes,
So
please.
one, this puts me, and I've said this at Board of Health before, but this puts me in this weird position of sounding like I'm, or some of us are like pro-development or something, which is so weird to feel like. But I think one of the reasons that I'm a little bit disappointed in this process is that the Board of Health, before I came on and while I came on, was very reluctant to approve variances because of what's in Title V for the bedroom credit. So the idea is that you would be able to get an IA system in exchange for something because they are expensive, right? And there are benefits and trade-offs like everything else. But I think that the board has stated a bit of a preference because they didn't want to grant these variances anymore. And we sort of backed ourselves into this a little bit. I'm not saying there isn't merit to these. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm not saying I won't support in the end. But the variance is in our draft regs right now, and it is vague. And I think what this letter is asking is for there to be something defined for these particular reasons in here. And so what I'm hoping as a select board member and as the representative on the Board of Health is that if the Board of Health, the majority feels that we should include these provisions, then we should enumerate them in our regulations and not leave them vague.
I think that's a very good point, Tom. Are you set for now, Tom?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I just made two quick points.
Yeah.
The sewer was brought up before about a general appetite on sewer, and I think that's true, or at least there was no appetite for sewer. I think that's true as far as Matticat goes, and Nat made some good points on that. But I can tell you as a select board member that we've obviously put this Somerset Needs sewer project on the warrant for a particular good reason. We actually split on it and then changed our minds after we had our sewer master plan meeting, which I highly advise anybody interested in this topic to go watch. And what's particular about that project, there's 0% financing, and there's also that the state may come in and force us to do it. So there's a lot of other moving parts besides that exist in this on why that is out there. Anyway, I just wanted to note that sometimes these things have multiple moving parts and contexts and trade-offs that aren't always packaged in a bullet point.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Penny?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the appropriate time to sort of make a comment about one of these recommendations, but I'm going to do it anyway. So the first one is provide hardship waivers for year-round residents. Is that allowed to treat one class of owners differently than others? I thought it wasn't. Doesn't it violate some commerce clause or something? So everything needs to be obviously subject to legal review before it becomes regulation. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Brooke?
Sorry, struggled to find the unmute button there for a second. I wouldn't mind. I think Dylan's hand went up when Penny was asking the question. Could we hear, Dylan, were you going to respond to her question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can we do that first, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and just quickly, I 100% agree with Penny. Everything obviously should go through legal review. But if my memory is correct, when I presented to the Select Board and the Board of Health about this, I believe Town Council was on the call and clarified that year-round residence as defined by somebody with their primary residence here, it would be legal and is non-violation, but with the caveat that yes, please legal review for all of this.
Great. Thank you, Dylan.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, I just want to piggyback on what Tom said about context and the bigger picture. And I really would like these revised regulations to have these conditions in them and have them specified as guidance to the Board of Health as they're looking to make exceptions, and also to really demonstrate that we are thinking together about the prioritization of year-round housing. And we're thinking, the planning board and the select board have been talking for a number of years now around how the intersection between planning and the select board's number one goal of supporting the creation and retention of year-round housing, right? And some of that year-round housing is what we think of as naturally occurring, right? It's the family that's been on their property generationally, whose wealth is tied to their home, and they may not have cash in the bank. And we don't want to we don't want to have a policy in place that is going to press a family to sell to a seasonal homeowner because an IA system is unaffordable. Now, when it's necessary, that's one thing. I mean, absolutely necessary. But when it is not imperative, I think having this exception is critical. So really, this reflects marrying the strategic goals for the entire community of the select board in concert with planning and Board of Health, and really thinking collaboratively about how the decisions we make impact other, island-wide priorities. And so this meeting, I'm sorry that I was late, but I think it's critical that we do more of this conversation together so that everybody understands the bigger picture, sort of as Tom was trying to articulate. So thank you.
No, I think, and to Brooke's point, I think that a clear path to either hardship waivers or loans to mitigate these issues for families is very important, and that it is drawn out in the regulations so that people know what to do, where they can get help if they come up against it.
Mr. Chair, Mary has her hand raised. I'm not sure if you can see it.
I probably can't see it. Mary Mack? No, Mary.
Lepre.
Sorry,
Mary Lepre. Oh, hi.
I just have. I think I'm a little confused because it sounds like these 4 bullet points are going to make what is actually written a lot more specific, because what it says is the Board of Health, in its sole discretion, may issue a variance from the strict application of these regulations in accordance with the criteria set forth. So it seems like we're leaving it a little more open, and this might make it a little stricter. And I'm not saying yay or nay. I'm just asking that question. There is a loan program, so I think it's a 2%, but there is, if you need to replace your septic, there is a loan program. So that was, I don't know if somebody else knows those answers. I know that there is a loan program. I'm assuming that this, they think is being implied as different.
Or maybe it's just that it's buried and people don't know about it, and it needs to be, it needs, that information needs to be more easily accessed by the community.
100% agree.
Yeah. Brooke.
And I would say we're thinking of these as sort of like sort of a minimum specific criteria that support the goal of year-round housing. It's not to say there couldn't be and for any other reasons the Board of Health deems, leave the broader language, Mary, that you refer to, but really enumerate and articulate these to Dave's point, so that a family who goes, oh my God, we have to do an IA system, can look and say, oh, but I can go, I have the opportunity to go for a variance based on these situations, and are these my situation? do these apply to me?
Dylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I get my question, I think probably for John would be, my understanding is that the existing septic loan program would not be available to people who have to upgrade their system to IA under the updated regulations, in the instances of property transfers or new construction, that the septic loan betterment program only applies to failed septics. But that might be a misunderstanding on my part.
Yes, if I can go through you, Mr. Chair.
Please,
That's
John.
correct, Dylan. Yeah, the whole program set up by DEP, in which we get money from the state to assist with that in our nitrogen sensitive areas, that's correct. It's a 2% loan over 20 years, goes on your tax bill, and was established for failed systems in the nitrogen sensitive areas, as well as connection to sewer.
Do you have a sense of whether the state would be willing to extend that to the new construction, and transfer as well?
I don't know the answer to that. We can investigate that.
I think that would be
Yeah.
helpful, definitely. Dylan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to say that the specific recommendation is to extend the septic loan to include that. But thank you.
Brooke?
Again, this may have already been brought up, so correct me, tell me if I just need to go back and watch the tape. Did we talk about what types of construction trigger this? Because to me, a scenario where someone's putting a deck on their house should have like no impact on water
I don't know a
treatment.
deck, but we talked about if they just added a room that it would trip it.
Any construction.
Any construction. So a deck, I guess, would too.
Okay, so I'd love to maybe further refine that, because that feels like you're connecting dots where they don't really connect to the health of the environment or the island, because a deck doesn't impact water usage or septage at all. So I think it bears perhaps further refining as to what construction means, whether it's, additions that contribute to water and sewer usage, that would trigger an upgrade to the septic system. Again, I'm not as knowledgeable about this as you guys, but I just want to bring that up.
I think that's a very good point. Anne?
I think John Hedden can speak to this. We deal with this all the time. What constitutes something that makes it need to be upgraded or turned into an IA, and I don't think we've ever looked at a deck. John?
A deck would not be a trigger to upgrade a septic system, as it's defined in the definitions. It's addition of habitable space. So expanding, I just do want to point out that, Tom Nevers is not in the conversation in regard to these regulations. However, if you built an extra room in Tom Nevers and you had a septic system built pre-1995 and not up to current standards, you might have to upgrade that septic system, not to necessarily an IA, but you might have to upgrade it anyways, if it's substandard. So I just kind of wanted to point that factor out, that there's always upgrades to septic systems. Their life is probably 30 years, on average. So they need to be repaired, upgraded. They don't last forever, in short. So, but back to the question is, new construction is addition of habitable space. So that might be an office, that might be another living room, might be a bedroom, anything like that.
And that I think is difficult. It's a problem. I mean, my own personal situation, I recently built a house for my daughter. I put in an oversized septic because there would be another dwelling on the property at some point. So I've paid money to put an oversized septic in, but now with this new regulation, I'd be forced to get an AI. So I think that is a financial burden for most locals. I'm going to go out on a limb and say most. Penny.
No, I just Brooke missed the earlier part of the meeting, but there should be like a nexus, right, between the regulations for septic systems, to my knowledge, have always been based on per flow per bedroom, not per flow per habitable space, right? 110 gallons per bedroom, or 110 gallons per 10,000 square feet. And to say that if somebody adds non-sleeping space onto the house, it just seems punitive. It seems like you're kind of, I'm not questioning the need for the regulations of protecting the groundwater, reducing nitrogen load, none of that. I just think we need to have, again, cause and effect here. And I think it should be bedrooms, not habitable space. I just think there are going to be unintended consequences that you're going to be doing a lot of variants for special variances. Just my opinion. Thank you.
Carrie.
So, and John, you can confirm this for me. When we're talking about new construction and that definition, that's not our definition. That's Title V, isn't it?
No, that's our own.
Okay, so it is that's a local definition.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we're locally focused, on building itself, where Title V is focused on addition of design flow.
Yeah. And I know that, historically that, what defining what a room is used for is very difficult to do. I mean, saying we call it a living room and then I can rent it out by putting up a little thing, so I think, the focus has been on flow, I think it's 110 gallons. Essentially a 4-bedroom house would be on 1 acre. So 440 gallons per day is the flow rate.
Right.
And that's really the number, that we're using to go from.
Which, excuse me, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Penny.
Which is based on sleeping capacity, right? Because the people that are sleeping there are the ones who are creating the effluent, not the people who are in the den or the living room. It's who's sleeping there.
If I could, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So there is a calculation of total rooms that you count as well. And so if we went by Title V standards, you count the number of rooms inside the house. If there's 10 rooms, you'd need to design a house for 5 bedrooms, because you take the number of rooms and you divide by 2 and round down. So if it was 9 rooms, you would need a 4-bedroom system. If it was 10 rooms, you'd need a 5-bedroom system. That's Title V. Locally, we have some different definitions, which we had upgraded about a year ago, based on rooms having full bathrooms that were being called offices, studio buildings with a kitchen and everything, and it being an office. So try to capture those scenarios where seemed more logical. Someone who's going to be sleeping there than doing office work.
Yeah, I don't envy you guys having to count bedrooms. Anybody else?
This, Carrie again.
Sure, yep.
I'm looking at bullet 3 and, establishing financial assistance. Would that be something where, again, doing it through a tax break from the town as opposed to grants and stuff like that? That, again, and I remember Michael Hugo, one of the experts from the Cape, he goes, when you ask people to do something, it can seem punitive, but if you give them something back, at least there's a balance in, that there's a recognition that you understand the stress it's causing, but we do need to do stuff too. So is there an issue of, rather than financial assistance per se, that would do it through taxes, tax break, just as the loan program is done by adding that to your tax bill, not as a bill that you pay separately. So, and when in the meeting, in the discussions we've had, we've gone through a variety of trying to find wording to address the affordable housing type issue. And we did jump to Title V regulation that talked about environmental justice. That created more, that created a lot more problems. And so we took that out. And then one of the last ones we did is we had a phrase that said the board may, under special variance, and it has the Board of Health sole discretion. We added the board may, in its discretion, grant a requested waiver if necessary to avoid undue hardship for properties subject to conditions set forth by and we said Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust. What we were going for with that type of wording is that there are guidelines about affordable housing already, like in terms of deed restricted, and we have a couple of things, and to tie variance requests to that, those things would happen too. So if we granted it, that it also would be year-round resident and maybe deed restricted. So we've been struggling to find that language or that guidance that has something concrete to attach to. The environmental justice was way fluffy, so it wasn't going to help anybody. We used wording from the environmental trust, or affordable trust, but they said, well, that's not the only agency in town. So, we have been struggling with it. And then we said, well, let's go back to the special variance, because that does give us the flexibility to decide. And I think what the discussion here is, can somewhere, whether it's in the document or in a related document that describes what are some of the conditions that would be, that the board would be open to considering a variance.
I think, again, anything you can do to have that information available to the general public so they know what applies to them, what doesn't, and how they can resolve a problem surrounding this, I think is helpful. Hillary.
Thanks very much. In addition, as you move forward with this, I just wanted to be cognizant of some of the comments that came from my fellow board members on the planning board, maybe reaching out to our planning staff, to the folks that work in our GIS mapping department, to put together some overview of how many dwellings are in these areas. In the wellhead protection area, a lot of them are sewered. So I do think those are good, valid concerns, and that it would be helpful to just have an idea of how many people are being affected, and how many have septic systems. If we have data about when they've been updated, things like that would be good to, as you refine this, to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Tom.
Yeah, I don't want to appear as like frustrated here, but we didn't do any of that. I'm not sure, like we didn't do any of that at a Board of Health meeting. So I didn't know about any of that, and there was no legal guidance in our packet on any of that. So I'm a little bit at a loss on that things are happening that are sort of outside of the board. And I'd very much like to request to my fellow board members that we have town council do this, Greg Corbo or John Giorgio, and not MAHB. It has to go through town council. I will not vote on anything that doesn't come from town council. So I think we need to have a little bit more clarity on who's talking to who and what exactly where we're going on this.
Tom, I don't know what you're talking about with MAHB.
Well,
I think Kerry used the word Mike Hugo when he meant the consultant that had spoken on behalf of the Cape.
Well, that was a training session that we were involved in.
Kerry, am I right that the points that you read off at a last meeting were from MAHB?
Read off at the last meeting.
Those were from town council, or those were from staff?
Town council has reviewed the documents. the regulations. Those have got what's presented now has town council has gone over it and approved it.
But who you cited that you were working, or that the board was working with somebody on these affordable housing in the general points? Who has been working on those?
No, what I had said is we looked at the Affordable Housing Trust
Who's we?
guidelines. Me, John Hedden, and we looked at the guidelines as to what is the definition of, what guidelines do they have in place for affordable housing that we can maybe incorporate into the regulation. It was looking for wording to help define, those criteria and, what would we consider, what wouldn't we consider.
So why wasn't that in the packet? Why wasn't that? I think that would save a lot of this conversation.
That draft was dropped.
So then why are we having this meeting then? If it's been dropped, I don't understand.
So Dom, maybe this is a better discussion at a board.
Yeah, you're right. I apologize, Mr. Chair.
It's fine. I just don't think we're going to accomplish anything. So I think, clearly it's Meg's back. Give me a sec, Meg. I mean, clearly this is all in the purview of the Board of Health. And I think you guys have heard our concerns. And I really would urge you as well to integrate the concerns of the select board into your change in the septic regs. And then I think we should come back and talk about it again. I'm not sure we're going to accomplish much more at this meeting unless somebody wants to call me out on that. I do have a couple hands up. Meg Ruley.
Mr. Chair, we're not taking public comment.
Oh, we're not taking. Okay, Meg, I'm sorry, we're not taking public comment. Dylan, your hand's up.
I was just going to say to that point that I think obviously none of the boards are voting on anything today, but it would be helpful as staff to get a sense of what we should be doing in between now and setting up a follow-up meeting and or having board representatives go to the public hearings that the Board of Health has, so that we can continue this forward.
Yeah. I mean, and yes, please raise your hands if you have some ideas here. Is Mary Mack on Affordable Housing Trust?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Mary, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. I was just thinking, has anyone looked into what other countries outside of the US do, like small countries like the Netherlands, Denmark, I think Singapore, Japan? Those countries seem to do a pretty good job handling issues like this. And I'm just wondering if we could in some way copy them. That's all.
All right. That's a good thought. Brooke.
As a path forward, to Mary Mack's point, none of them are subject to the rules of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or the United States of America. So I think it gets, I think in general for ideas, yes, but from a legal standpoint, I think it gets complex to go too far afield. But as to steps forward, I would love for planning staff, Board of Health staff, and Affordable Housing Trust staff to work on maybe proposing a revision of the proposed regulations that incorporate these suggestions that are supported, I think, by the select board, obviously in this letter, and the Affordable Housing Trust as you're hearing today, and then cycle that revised draft through to the three boards at their independent meetings. Because it's easier to get it on schedules that way, and then see if there's consensus, and then maybe there isn't a need for another meeting, and then have it reviewed by town council, and then give it to each of the participating boards to just get to advise the Board of Health as to whether the common concerns are included Just as a thought.
I mean, I think you're doing the right thing. I think we're just all really concerned about some unintended consequences here, I think is what it comes down to.
I think that Brooke's idea is excellent.
Yep, I agree.
I think that's how we should proceed. And I will say something that you guys are going to laugh about, but I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill here. Because honestly, the Board of Health is perfectly willing to incorporate aspects of these 4 points into the regulations. So it's just a question of how it happens and how it sounds. And, you know, we're not way in totally different districts here at all.
Oh, you're right. You're right. I think that again, we just need to incorporate those and then look at it again and read it again and just make sure that we're really not hurting the people that we want to hurt, and that there's some sort of avenue to protect those people that live on the island that would be severely hurt by this. So anyone else have something to say? I think Brooke's call to action is the right one. Yes, Carrie.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I guess my one question is, since earlier in the meeting we had all said, at least not all, many people said that the Hummock Pond situation there's direct cause effect and does need to be addressed. Would the Board of Health going forward with the Hummock Pond regulations as stated be okay? Since there is I think people were very comfortable with the cause effect of Hummock Pond and the eutrophication. Or is there a preference that we hold both of them and rework?
I think that there's local residents in the Hummock Pond area that deserve the same protection as the ones in the wellhead recharge, and I would just want to make sure that those are specifically enumerated in your regulations.
Yeah, and
that's my and please, anyone else raise their hand. That's just my opinion.
And then the other would be, then do we go back to Mattocket and change the regulations there, which would be allowing stuff that we blocked?
And the harbor. I mean, are we going to start?
Why are you turning that rock over, Carrie? It's done.
But just the thing is, there is a certain, we are concerned, but we have parts of the island do have these regulations for the reason we're talking. I definitely agree about the portable housing and coming up with something, and that it's, again, if we are going to do it, to give something back in some way, shape, or form, or have a support system in place to help families be able to do it. That's absolutely what I want to see. But we do have regulations on other parts of the island that would seem potentially more punitive if. So
well, let's figure this out.
Maybe
it's not a full rewrite; it's just an adjust.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems like we want a clarification as to what types of situations could trigger the Board of Health to look at a special variance for new construction or construction that would fall under these regulations.
And the loan program needs to be updated, and I think you need to check with the state to see if you can add those other situations. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Yeah, I agree with Carrie. I mean, in what you just said, I don't think it's a total rewrite, but I do think that you probably have some comments or concerns that came in over the time since you implemented these plans. So why not go back and readdress them? Maybe there's some fine finessing of the language or some, exceptions you guys can create. But I do think if it's been in place and there's some problems, well, what are the problems? And were they justified? Are we really kind of got it right? Or do we just, fine tune it here and there slightly? So I do think you should look at it. And I think it would be wise every 5 years to kind of come back and look at all these, rewrites. What are we having? Like I'm going to say BPAC, where all of a sudden we have e-bikes running amok. And so we need to kind of get ahead of them. So I think we should be staying ahead. I know you guys are doing a really good job trying to stay current in what adaptive, new systems are coming forward. So I think anything we can keep moving and keep, protecting Nantucket would be great. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Brooke.
Yeah, and I think to Joe's point about things changing, like the year-round deed restriction without an affordability clause is a brand new tool that we didn't know was going to exist today. And is it something we want to include across the board? Because the year-round housing situation has gotten more dire. And so really it's a balancing act. And I appreciate you guys hearing us out today very much. And to Anne's point, the willingness to incorporate these things and it's important that they are in writing, because as boards turn over, the memory of the why we do it gets lost if it's not written down. Why we're making variances and giving special variances and so forth. So having it enumerated is important to me. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Great. Good. So I think we're in a good place. And listen, I want to acknowledge the amount of work you guys have put into this. I don't want you to think that we're just sitting here and beating you up and thinking you haven't done work, because I know it's been a lot of work. And so we do appreciate that. So if no one else has anything to say, I think Dylan.
I'll just be quick, but I just want to echo the thanks of everybody taking the time to do this. And I think, as we all know, we hear a lot at the board meetings about the importance of interdepartment and interboard collaboration. I think this is a really great example of that. So just from my seat of staff, I want to say thanks to everybody.
Great. Thanks. With that said, I would Penny.
Sorry, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn the meeting, not to return, for the Affordable Housing Trust. Is there a second?
Quick to the trigger.
Second.
Thank you. By roll call vote, all those in favor, Brooke?
Aye.
And thank you, Mary.
Aye.
And Chantal?
Aye.
And the vice chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. I'd entertain a motion from someone on the planning board.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion made by Joe, seconded by Nat, I believe. Joe.
Aye.
Nat.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. I think Hillary left the meeting. So
Thank you,
again,
Board of
thank
Health.
you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Board of
we need the
Health.
board, I guess, the Board of Health. Someone make a motion for Board of Health, please.
Motion to adjourn the Board of Health meeting.
Second.
In favor,
Roll call.
Mary,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Tom,
Aye.
and I. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff. You guys are the best. We wouldn't be anything without you. And
That's
that
for
goes
sure.
for all the staff on this. Thank
That
you.
is for sure.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.